Greetings, fellow quitters, and welcome back to the Command Cube podcast. We're your hosts. I'm John Pelfrey.
And I'm Maari Casey.
If you feel like things just aren't built to last anymore, you aren't imagining it. These days, it's pretty normal for our clothes, our tools, our electronics, or pretty much anything that we own in our house to break down. And then we just throw them out. We get a new one. And if you've ever wondered if there's still life left in some of those things that we routinely throw away, so do we, quite frankly. And with the price of just about everything going up, today we're going to talk about how to get your money's worth by repairing your stuff instead of replacing it. So,
dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, I know. Like, this is one of those things, it does feel like it's harder to repair things now. Definitely companies are making it more difficult. One of the classic ones, we used to be able to swap out batteries in our mobile phones, and now they're all embedded in, and you have to buy a new phone, or you got to take it to some place and get them to fix it for you because you can't crack it open. And, that's just one of many examples. So if you wanted to get like a pair of your shoes repaired, would you know who to call? Would you know how to do that?
It's funny, actually. I do have someone, but I haven't seen him in several years. There's a guy in downtown Durham. Which street is he on? I think he's on North Duke Street. I can't remember, but he's downtown. And I remember I was looking, so I had a pair of boots that I really liked. And I was like, I need to find a cobbler, which sounds so like old timey.
Yeah.
And someone recommended this guy, and I went down there, and he was great. Placed the heels of my shoe, fixed the bottom of it, and it was good to go. If I had a shoe issue and I have a pair of shoes that I love, I would go to this cobbler that I know in downtown Durham.
Yeah, and there are definitely some good cobblers around. I've bought several pairs of boots and had the soles replaced in them. In fact, if I'm spending more money than just sneaker money, I will always make sure that it's a repairable shoe as opposed to because like expensive dress shoes, boots, things like that, you're talking about hundreds of dollars oftentimes. And the leather and the upper and everything is still perfectly fine. Like, there's no reason to throw that stuff out. It's just a matter of, you want to make sure that you can repair it. And there are still some cobblers around. There's still like watchmakers around to fix old watches. Yeah. There's still, these people exist, but they are harder and harder to find. That's, I think, one of the challenges. But thanks to the internet and other things, you can also find, people on the internet, and you can ship your shoes to them or whatever, and then they'll ship them back. And I've found a few of those options as well. Even things like, getting your clothes hemmed or patched or fixed, or, there's a whole movement of people for the idea of like, buy things once and keep it, and, don't buy any more than you have to, repair things, fix things. It's interesting to me because at some point, everything sort of felt like it became disposable, and it happened during our lifetimes. At some point, we went from, everything being like, oh, you go buy a Craftsman wrench at Sears and it has a lifetime warranty on it, to you go buy any piece of tool or whatever from a hardware store, and it's like, yeah, I mean, you get lucky to have a year out of that thing, and then they won't help you repair it. There's no warranty, whatever. So how do you think we got to things being so disposable? What happened there?
I mean, a couple of things. I think that globalization gave us access to cheaper materials, which is probably a whole other podcast or series about the positive and negative side effects of being able to make things overseas at a lower cost, and what the effects of that. I do feel like that's one of the biggest parts of it. Is a lot of things used to be manufactured locally, and so there wasn't as much access to stuff, and things were more expensive in that time. But I think that caused a lot of people, like, now I can get this item at half cost, and I don't have to worry about it if it falls apart because it's not as expensive, versus like you would go and get, maybe not in our days, but our parents' days, like you'd get, 2 or 3 pairs of shoes that would last you all year for school. And like, I remember going out and getting my school shoes in September, August, and that was like your school shoes or your church shoes. And you wore them all year and they would last. And it's because they were expensive. And so you took care of them. And I think that when things became maybe a little bit more commoditized and cheaper and maybe didn't last as long, we kind of justify like, well, I'm not paying as much, so I don't really care if it's going to last forever. I think especially in the United States, like incomes have increased. So there's a lot more disposable income. People's credit card uses have, again, another podcast, credit card uses have increased. And so the idea of acquiring and buying more stuff became a lot more readily available, even if you didn't. I mean, you probably the same thing. I never saw my parents pull out a credit card. And when debit cards came out, like they had debit cards, but we never had credit cards. It was always paid in cash, paid in cash, paid in cash. I don't know, it's different per family, but I think the idea of buying something before you have money for it via credit is like way more accessible and normalized in our day and age, which just gives people extra cash just to buy stuff that they want.
Yeah. Well, and now you don't even have to have a credit card. You can just put stuff in your checkout cart on any e-commerce site, and then they'll give you the option through several different companies like Klarna and some others.
Yeah.
Hey, would you like to pay for this over 6 months for zero interest or whatever? And it's just right there and it's easily accessible, and you can do it in 30 seconds and get approved. And it's not, of course, it's not free. There's always a fee or something tacked onto it. So you're still actually paying interest on it. It's just they put it as a processing fee, and then they say 0% interest on the back end. I've done it a couple times just to see what they were like. And I never do those types of things for more than like a couple $100 just because I'm curious and I'm like, I'll pay this off like normal or whatever. So I do things like buy tennis strings with it. I've done that once, and some others just to see what would happen.
Yeah.
And every time it's like, oh, and there's this $7 processing fee. And okay, that's where you're making your money. I like to test out things like that just to see what's going on and how people make money. And if it costs me $7 to learn how it works, then it's fine with me. But yes, so I just looked up this website called The History of Planned Obsolescence. It's it's sustainableagency.com. And it looks like it's European based because they have this article in here where they say that we are estimated to lose about 50,000 euros in value over our lifetime due to planned obsolescence. So in US dollars, it's probably like a little over 60 grand. And then they break down the story of like, it all began with a light bulb in 1924. That was the first thing that people bought, that it just didn't last for very long. And it wouldn't necessarily be planned at that time. It was probably a technological issue or something. Pretty soon, people started to figure out that different filaments lasted different amounts of time, and that, we could sell more light bulbs if we used a slightly cheaper filament. And the idea of like disposable started to creep into our world. According to these guys, it was all thanks to the light bulb. And then the desire, like you said, to buy new stuff all the time, to have something new is another key piece of what they're talking about. And there were even like this, it's a really interesting sort of website, but it even goes into the idea that like there was a time when women's stockings were basically indestructible. They were made out of nylon, lasted forever. And now you can't walk like 100 feet without getting a run or them tearing or whatever. And it was the same kind of concept. And so this isn't really a new idea. It's been around for a long time, probably since the beginning of the industrial age in some ways. But it has definitely reached a point where I feel like companies and manufacturers have built this into their product life cycle so much that they expect that, when we buy this new thing, we're going to have to buy another one of them in 6 months or a year or 18 months or 3 years. And they're building their whole revenue model off of, this thing's going to break, and then they're going to buy another one. And now they've just conditioned us, I think, to just expect it instead of it to last as long. And I joked about the Craftsman wrench or whatever, but when I was young, my dad and my grandfather both said, always buy Craftsman because it's a lifetime warranty. If something of theirs breaks, you just take it back to Sears, which doesn't exist anymore. Buy, right? And then you get a new one. And we did that on several occasions. And I was amazed as a kid, like, my dad can take this broken tool in and he leaves with a new one because it has a lifetime warranty. And of course, you can make the argument, well, Sears went under. They don't exist anymore. Maybe this is part of the reason why. But I'm not sure that that's the case because it also built loyalty. I think Sears had other problems and other issues around it.
Yeah, I definitely feel like it's, like you said, it's kind of baked now into their business model a little bit. And maybe that feels a little negatively capitalistic. But I do think it's, there needs to be some consumption. It's like you buy something that's got a lifetime warranty. I'm going to have this one screwdriver forever. Thank you, Sears, Craftsman. See ya. My money's done with you. And I think now for businesses to survive, I think it's a harder product and stuff is a harder place to survive because if you're selling something that they can use forever, then you only have a customer for one time, And so I do feel like that's part of it. I think maybe the quality of products slightly different than what it was when we were growing up. We talked about this yesterday with cars where, cars were cars growing up and now they're like computers. And so every time you go in and something's making a weird sound, you have to pay a certain amount of money to plug it into the computer to figure out what's wrong with this dial and things like that. And I'm like, I remember I had a roll-up window for the longest time, probably until 2008, 2009. I had my Honda Civic with the roll-up window. It was like perfect. So basic. And then I remember all my friends had like automatic windows and they would have all these issues as they get stuck or like the battery would die or something would happen. And I was like, I can just roll up my window, roll it down all
That's
day.
right.
But it's like once things get a little bit more complex and the mechanisms and the parts get more complex, then there's more likely that the things inside of them are going to break and the pieces are going to break. And you might not be, I'm not educated enough to be able to fix mechanical issues in modern cars. And so you don't fix them. You have to take them to somebody else or you buy something new. And I think that a lot of our materials, a lot of our products, not even just cars, are now all computers and much more complicated than they probably were.
Yeah. We've traded off some technology and convenience and things for that sort of repairability too. I mean, the original idea of the Volkswagen Beetle was that anybody could repair it, right? That was the whole concept. I mean, it's the car for the people. That was the idea. And it was simple enough that an average person with basic tools could, buy it and swap out parts. And that's one of the biggest selling, if not the biggest selling automobiles of all time. I mean, the original version of that ran for like 50 years, almost unchanged. So there's something to be said for that and the loyalty that created with that brand. And now if you look at that brand, what's interesting is there's not really much loyalty for that brand anymore, especially here in the United States. Part of that has to be around this change of like sort of this feeling of almost betrayal. Like you built your reputation on this ability for me to be able to fix it and change it or whatever. And now, thanks to new technology and everything, I can't do that. And it costs me more. And we've given some of that up too in response to safety and technology for safety. Like we were talking about your windshield needing to get replaced. And part of the cost of that is to get the camera recalibrated that does the lane sensing technology and the distance between the cars when you turn on
sensor
control. Yeah, like cruise control.
Cruise control.
And when you turn that on and you can keep the distance between the cars and everything. And so that costs a lot of extra money just to get that thing recalibrated. You're not just getting a piece of glass put on there anymore. Now you got to pay an extra fee on top of that. And now what used to be a couple $100 repair is like a $1,500 repair. And so it's this weird question of like, how much of this do we need in our lives? How much of this technology, this convenience, or could it just be that I could continue to drive like I've always driven? Is it safer for everybody if we all use these technologies? There's all these societal questions, but then it's also like who pays those bills and who carries it? And the answer every single time is the consumer carries for that cost.
Well, and then once it breaks, what are we doing with it? Are we repairing it? Or are we throwing away? I do feel like one of the things we talk about with my family is when you're looking at spending money on things versus not spending money on things, buying cheaply. And it's been an interesting conversation with my kids as, when you're a kid and you have $5, you're like, I gotta spend it on stuff, and you go and you spend $5 worth of like plastic crap that sits in your drawer. But it's just that idea of consuming. And it's so interesting to see that now coming through my kids because you see that drive early of like, I've got money, I got to spend it. And then having to wait and like delayed gratification, save a little bit more money to be able to get the thing I really want, even though I've got to wait on it. And so we talk a lot about it. It's like, if something's important enough to you to where you want it to last, you'll spend more money on it so that, it's something that you're going to have longer and you have to wait longer to get it. So it's the idea of like buying things that are more durable, but they might be a little bit higher cost, and the things that are like less important to you, are maybe either you don't buy them or they're not as expensive. And it's, it's the idea that it's hard to like slow down that idea just to consume and to buy. So I think we try to put those intentional questions in the front of that. It's like, what are you trying to buy? Like, what is the goal with this purchase versus just like blindly adding things to your room?
Yeah, absolutely. I tend to live under the mantra of buy once, cry once. I love that phrase.
Right? Is that your quote?
No, it is not mine. I stole it from someone else that I heard that stole it from someone else, whatever. But it's this idea that, like you buy something that's good, that's well made. It's going to cost you a little extra money. So you're going to cry over it a little bit, but it's going to save you money over time. The best example that I can give to this is a local Raleigh company, Raleigh Denim Workshop, where I met Victor and Sarah years and years ago. They did an event at our art gallery. And at the time, this was like 2010 or 11 or something like that. And they came and did this workshop and they talked about, why do you want to spend at that point $250 on a pair of jeans? That seemed like a lot of money when the average pair of jeans was like $60. And they're like, why do you want to do it? Well, these are handmade out of raw denim. They will last you 5 times longer than the cheap stuff that you buy at the mall. And you get to live in these and experience these and have these for a really, really long time. And you can repair them. And the more you repair them and the more they get beat up, the cooler they look. Yeah. And so it's part of that experience. And that was one of my earliest sort of like ideas of like, oh, if I spend a little extra money, I won't have to buy 6 pairs of jeans. I'll have 1 pair of jeans
Mhm.
and I'll be able to keep them for a really long time. Now their jeans cost a little bit more because the cost of production has gone up and all that. But I still really believe in that concept, and I still buy their jeans and other pieces of clothing like that because I don't want to be the person that just goes on Amazon and buys the cheapest thing possible. I've
Yeah.
done that too. And that stuff just falls apart in a few months. It doesn't matter what it is. If it's clothes, if it's some electronic junk or gadget, it just doesn't last. It is
Yeah.
that feeling of like being a kid and spending your $5 on whatever and not really getting anything out of it or for it. And so
Yeah.
I'd rather save and spend, more money and then get the thing that I can live with for longer.
I do feel like clothing is a good example. Upcycling. I feel like upcycling and that stuff has become even more in vogue. A couple of years ago, there was that group called the Minimalists, and they're still around, but talking about just downsizing. Because I do feel like the newer generation is starting to, in some ways, downsize a little bit. So like they don't need all the knickknacks and the things. They want like a small space. They don't need a huge house. So it's an interesting way that things are changing. But like I love thrift store shopping, and there's an online consignment store that I go to called threadup.com. And you can go and actually buy really nice brands at a dramatically reduced cost. And if you know what your sizes are, you know what you want, then you can buy these brands at half price and they're good quality stuff if you're not paying full price for it. And it does feel good. It feels like there's a lot of ways that people have modernized, upcycling, repairing, reusing things. Of course, like vintage appliances and things like that are also kind of in vogue now. So there's opportunities to be able to like create longevity around these things that I don't think it was there 10, 15 years ago. It's a little bit more current now.
Yeah, definitely. And then, even that's a great website, just eBay, good old school eBay. I buy most of my clothes on eBay.
The flea market.
Yeah, flea market, wherever, because it's like if you buy good stuff that you know is going to last a long time, whatever it is, you can get it used and know that you've still got another few years use out of it or whatever. So there's all kinds of places where you can upcycle. I tend to buy tools secondhand as well. Anything that has a big depreciation cost on it, I'm a big believer in letting someone else take that hit. Why should I go buy a new car and lose $10,000 as soon as I drive it off the lot when I could buy a 2-year used car and save that $10,000? Like that math doesn't work for me. Like it just doesn't work. It's the same. And it's becoming that way with other things too. But anything that is a big ticket item for sure, I'm looking for the vintage, the old, or the repairable, or the upcycled version, because it just seems like a waste to throw away that money on something shiny and new.
The other side of this, and I do the same thing. I do it with like a lot of cast iron skillets and pots and things like that, because people get rid of those all the time and they're just scrub it out and it's perfect.
Right.
But I think the other side of this is when, because I can also see myself doing this too. And I've known people who they will start to gather stuff, and it's hard sometimes it comes down to timing, but like, when do you need to this is like very Marie Kondo, but like, when do you need to let something go? Like, when is it, it's done, it's served its purpose, you no longer need that juicer, whatever it is. When is it time for something, whether or not it's broken, either to be, sent over to Goodwill or hand me down or tossed? Like, when is it time to say like, no more?
Yeah. I mean, I think that if you're not using something on a regular basis, and in Marie Kondo's, sort of terminology, like if it doesn't spark joy, then let it spark someone else's joy. I think there's something to be said for that as a mentality. My grandparents always had this rule that if you bring something new into the house, you had to let something else go out of the house. I think that comes from sort of like the old school Depression era. Like we don't want to have too much stuff, and then and it becomes too much to care for too. The more stuff you have, the harder it is to keep up with maintenance or taking care of things, and things just kind of sit and they get worse. But yeah, I like that idea of like passing it on. Sometimes I anthropomorphize some of the things that I own. Like I pretend like they deserve a good life, right? Like, so I mean, it seems silly.
Yeah, I agree.
But if a thing is made to be used, then someone should be using it if it's not me. And I mean, we definitely, if anyone plays guitar who's listening to this, I think everyone would agree, if you have a guitar that you're not playing, you should get it in someone's hands who is playing it. It should be an opportunity for them to use that instrument and let it create new music and different music. And that's something that, like, in the music world and in the guitar world, it's very much part of the culture, is like, if you're not using it and you're just holding on to it, unless you have a 1959, burst Les Paul.
You're saving it for other reasons.
then and it's worth $200,000. Sure, you might keep it for the investment value, but even in that world, like there's an argument with guitarists that like if you're not playing that burst, then you're not doing it justice because it's there to be played. And
Right.
so yeah, I mean, I think upcycling, even things like that, or passing it along to other people who are going to be using it, or seeing it as part of history and it has a story and it passes from one person's hands to another. My most cherished items that I own are things that were passed down to me. Or given to me by a friend. It's not things that I bought necessarily. There's very few things. Like I play this guitar, the one closest to me. It's a Larrivee that I bought with my own money, and I played every day, and I love it, and it's very playable. But the one farthest in the corner was my father-in-law's guitar, and it means far more to me because it was his guitar. I met my wife when she had it, and she was playing it. And then it came into my life, and it's one of those pieces that sort of connected me with my wife. And so I love that story is forever a part of that guitar. And, I hope it stays in my family forever and ever. But at some point, it might pass on to somebody else who will get some use out of it. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Do you think that, and I think I know what I would say too, but I feel like things that I are more likely to repair are things that I truly, truly care about. And if I'm less likely to repair them, then they're probably not, they don't hold a deep love in my, or an important place in my life. Maybe on a deep love, because our toaster's pretty critical, but I don't have a deep love for my toaster. So I think there is something to say, like when you're looking at things, if you're like, would I repair this or would I just toss it? Like how important is it? When you're looking at things as far as what do I need to keep and what do I need to, hand down or get rid of? I think understanding like, do I care about this enough to, Mark and I used to do this, my husband used to do this a lot, is like, would we move this? Is it worth it just to have this? Because right now we're going through renovation. And so we're moving things around all the time. And like, do we really want to keep this or do we want to pare it down? For the reason that there's other people that could use it. I'm not willing to repair it. It's not important enough to me for me to like, maintain it. And so looking at things like that too is also really interesting because it does help you realize like, oh, I've added too many things around me.
Yeah. Yeah. But then it also goes back to this whole like cheap goods concept too. If it is cheaper for me to buy a new toaster than it is to get my existing toaster repaired, then it doesn't make, financial sense in my household to get it repaired. It costs twice as much than to buy a new one. And then you sort of have this junk. And then we're not even talking about things like phones and laptops and pieces of technology that as things get better, they become obsolete or companies stop supporting the software on it or whatever anymore. And you're kind of forced into it. And then those things become e-waste and e-junk and all kinds of different things too. But yeah, you have to play this sort of like thing in your mind. Is it worth it for me to buy a new toaster or to get this one fixed? And if it's not, then I always run into this issue too of like, what do I do with that old broken stuff? Do I take it to the dump? I mean, there's a special pile at the dump for things like that. Do I take it there? Let whatever happened to it, happen to it? Yeah, it's a whole.
It's the Toy Story effect. You get emotional about.
Well, but there's just this moral quandary about it too.
Yeah.
Like, what am I supposed to do? Like, batteries are a thing that I know you're supposed to recycle batteries, obviously toxic and whatever. But the process to get rid of them is kind of a pain. And so it makes it difficult. And I can't imagine how many batteries are in landfills, for instance, or whatever, because of that. And I feel like we do that with a lot of things too. Things are so cheap. We play this ROI game in our head about, well, it's just cheaper for me to buy a new one. And then we toss it. And then I feel guilt about that stuff because I don't know, maybe I should or shouldn't. I don't know. I feel guilt about it whenever I throw things away like that because
I do too. Well, especially if it's salvageable. I think, when something is not salvageable, then it's like, okay, well, it's served its purpose. Like, we talked about I grew up with a microwave that lasted for like 25, 30 years. I think it was still functional when my parents like got rid of it, but it was just, it's 35 years old, probably was radioactive anyway. But those things were made to last and they're not as made to last anymore. The durability is just not as there. And I think it's knowing when you're like, okay, this toaster has served its purpose. It's had a good life. Thank you, toaster. I'm getting a new toaster and letting go of it. But it's good to at least think through. I think it's okay to have a little bit of guilt about what you're adding to the landfill because it is still waste. So that way, when you're going and you're buying again, maybe you're spending a little bit more money on something that's a little bit more durable or something that is repairable, or you're upcycling something you find at like an estate sale, which I also love to do. I like going to those kind of things, estate sales, thrift shops and things like that, because I do feel like I'm saving something from the landfill and reusing it. And so that does feel really good. So I think if you have that sense of like, I feel bad about tossing stuff, then that's a good sign. You're probably thinking a little bit more about repairing versus replacing, repairing versus tossing. So I think that's a good sign.
Yeah, it is amazing. The 80s microwaves lasted forever. It's unbelievable. My parents bought one in 1984 and they just got rid of it like 3 years ago. And
it's probably good that they got rid of it.
Yeah, it probably was good. I mean, but it's incredible. It still worked. It was a JCPenney branded microwave.
Yeah.
Too. It's fascinating because
I think ours was Montgomery Ward. If you remember Montgomery Ward.
Yeah. It's so funny but yeah, I mean, it lasted forever and ever. The other thing too that I think about this is, we have all these ways with Facebook Marketplace or Nextdoor.com or whatever. We can give away or get rid of things relatively easily to our neighbors and friends. And what's funny is like you and I have like recently on several occasions been like, hey, I'm not using this thing anymore. Do you want it? And we're just like swapping things back and forth. Like I gave you a tennis racket. You're going to give me a sewing machine for my wife. Like it's just this ability to like, swap amongst your friends and the people that if it's not giving you that joy or whatever, like just pass it on. And I have a lot of things in my house that other people could get use out of. And so, another way to do this is just to look around or ask friends, or if somebody has a need for something before you toss it, think of somebody that might be able to use it and just ask them, hey, would you be interested, in taking this off my hands? It's going to go to the dump if you don't want it.
Yeah.
Let somebody else use it. And so anyway, I always feel guilt. I don't know why.
I have a friend in the neighborhood who is she's like the queen of upcycling and repairing. So anytime I have something that I'm like, I'm done with this giant roll of saran wrap, she's like, I'll take it. I'm done with it. I had a bench that it had metal. Someone gave it to me, had like nice metal footings, but the actual seat was rotten. I just needed new boards and everything. And it needed to be sanded down and repainted. I don't have time to do that or anything. And I don't really need the bench. And so I was like, hey, would you like this? She's like, I'll take it. And I know she'll fix it up and look nice and she'll probably sell it for $100 or something like that. Yeah. But I love having a friend like that because then I know she's going to take it and give it a new life and someone else is going to love it. And it's, it's saving it from living in my backyard or something like that. So it's great.
Yes, absolutely. And we all need those people that will repair things and then, let them resell it or whatever. That's a wonderful way to think of it. As long as you don't end up being the person who just takes everything and then you just keep it and hoard it. Like that's a whole other conversation.
We don't want to we don't want to start hoarding stuff.
Yeah. Let's not encourage the hoarding side of it. But if you're going to take something off of somebody and then use it or repair it and move it on to somebody else, like wonderful. Absolutely. I think that's the culture that we all benefit from. So lightning round now, have you recently purchased something that fell apart almost immediately?
Yes. This is embarrassing to even say. Like, I got sucked into one of those like social media trends about this like fancy drink it's like a drink cup that you can put, like, say you put Coke in the bottom, you want to put like whiskey in the top, and you can like add your levels of beverage mix, which is, if you think about it intellectually, it's really stupid because like you just pour your booze and your Coke and then it's done. Like you don't need to be like mixing it in the cup. I don't know. Anyway, the video was really cool. And so my husband and I were going on a vacation. I was like, oh, I'm going to get this for us. It's going to be so great on the beach. And it like immediately fell apart. And then we just drank out of it like it was a cup. I was like, this is just another.
Yeah.
Luckily, I returned it and got my money back. But it was one of those things that I bought. And I was like, this, first of all, was a stupid purchase because like, you don't really need this. It's not like there's not a deep need for a cup that mixes stuff for you. And second of all, the mechanism of it was all just cheap plastic and stuff. So that was one thing that was immediately broke. And I was like,
Yeah, I bought a radar gun so that I could play with my son so that we could like goof off and see how hard we
I thought you were going to say you sat outside your house like aiming it at the cars that are driving.
I mean, anything I buy that's stupid is usually tennis related. So so I bought a radar gun just to see how fast our serves were and things like that. And of course, I got the cheapest one that seemed reasonable on Amazon, and it really did not work at all. Like it you had to hit the ball perfectly over the radar gun at this exact perfect angle to get something to read. And then even then the readings would be wildly different, even though the ball was basically the same ball every time. And so I can't trust it. And it was something that, it was one of those like things where I thought, I should stop buying sort of this just generic junk, just because I feel like, hey, this would be a fun afternoon activity.
Yeah.
And so now I have this piece of junk, and it was a sort of fun afternoon activity, but it never really worked. And I still don't know how hard I hit my serve. Not as hard as my son does, that's for sure. I can tell you that. But yeah, it was kind of silly and it didn't work. So does reusability ever go too far? Is there anything
Yes.
that you can't get behind, like cloth diapers is the example here in our
Oh
question?
man, so a long time since I've dealt with diapers, but for my first child, because it's your first child that you do this kind of stuff with, you make your own baby food, all that kind of stuff. And I did try the cloth diapers, and my husband shut it down. Like when he could not figure out how to put it on, and he kept putting it on backwards, he was like, "No, we're done." And I gave them away.
Mhm.
But yeah, I remember my mom talking about when she had kids that she had used cloth diapers. And so I wanted to I can do this. It's sustainable. It's so green. Like, I'm a great mom. I'm going to crush this. And then in actual practice, was not fun, not sustainable. So cloth diapers, I think, are hard. And not for everybody, but for me, it was hard for me to get behind something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think just like everything that you can go too far, or you can have things that work for other people but they don't work
Hmm.
for you, and that's okay too. Sometimes
Yeah.
things like a disposable diaper, like, okay, fine. That's not one that I necessarily in my mind need to fight over. I'm sure other people might think differently.
Yeah.
Yeah,
My dad used to reuse plastic bags. That was like the Ziploc bags.
Ziploc bags, yes,
Uh
yeah,
huh.
yeah. My grandmother washed them out until she passed away, and she would use
Hmm.
them over and over and over again. And again, I think there's serious value in that, and it's wonderful that you want to reduce your usage and all of that. But then there are other questions about, like, do the plastics in the bag leak into your food more, or you use them, and all,
Yeah.
there's a bunch of questions about that. Like, even plastic water bottles that you buy or whatever, like, they're really only meant for one use.
Hmm.
They're not
Oh
they're
yeah.
not meant to be a stable plastic and not
I
leak
think
in.
you and I have talked about reusing the country crock as Tupperware. Like that's
Yes.
my parents, all that stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and all of that seems good on the surface, but then what we're learning now is that actually, if you pop that thing in the microwave once, then your food is completely plastic on the inside. And you'll probably die from some gnarly disease. And
Yeah.
so,
We're
there
doomed.
are, yeah, so there are uses like that, and maybe the answer there is, hey, let's buy less plastic and let's buy things that are more like wrapped in, like, if you buy your butter, buy it wrapped in wax paper instead of in, something else, so that there's less material and all of those types of things. You store things in glass containers. We went through a whole deal where we got rid of all of our plastic food
Hmm.
containers and bought glass ones, because then we can wash them, we can reuse them, and we know that they're made out of glass and they'll last a long time as long as we don't drop them. And so that's, there's some smart decisions that you can make around things like that in your house too. But yeah, that would be one for me. Is we're learning so much about microplastics and their effects on our bodies and our health and everything, that we should find a different solution there, and maybe just don't buy them. And maybe then the companies and manufacturers will change the way they package things. I don't know. Yeah. So what's something that you have that's impressively old?
So we have a washer and a dryer that my husband moved from college to North Carolina. So
Wow.
that would have been in early 2000s. So that's this is washer and dryer is I always feel I'm nervous to talk about it because I feel like there's some kind of glitch in the matrix as to why this thing is still working and working well. But it's 20, 25 years old.
Yeah.
And it's still going, still working. So that's pretty amazing.
That is amazing. I have a dryer from the same era. We bought it in 2002 and we still use it. I've replaced the heating element in it 3 times. And other than that, it's been great. So speaking of repair, like, if you have a dryer and it's not drying anymore, but everything else works, it's probably the heating element. That is a relatively easy fix. You can find it on the internet. You just got to be willing to lay on your belly and get down there and find the little thing, unhook a couple screws, put it in, unplug the dryer from the wall before you do that, please.
Please do that. Do you
Follow the
turn the breaker
instructions.
off?
But it is not a complicated repair. And it is something
Mhm.
that, do not go spend $1,000 on a new dryer. That would be such a waste. So there are a lot of things like that you can do. So yes, I have a dryer from the same era. I also, the guitar that I mentioned before, that was my father-in-law's guitar. That's a 1949 Gibson J45. So that is 76 years old now. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So 76 years old. It's still playable, and it's an amazing guitar, and it's great. I hope it lasts 100 years or more. And I hope it's still playable. But that is something to me that it is the one object in the house that if the house catches on fire, that's the thing I'm grabbing and taking out. Like,
After your wife, right?
I assume
fire.
she can make it out on her own. I hope she can, but yes. But if she can't, her first, but then the guitar. I'd go back into the fire for the guitar. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, I think that's all we got. That's all for today. Thanks for tuning in and quitting with us. If you're new to the podcast, you can find us at commandcubepodcast.com. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and listen to some of our old back episodes. Until next time, I'm John.
And I'm Maari.
And we're reminding you that quitters can win and winners can quit. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute medical, legal, or financial advice. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the guest's own and do not necessarily represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Command Q or Uncompany.